I'm still at TIFF, and I just watched The Testament of Anne Lee starring Amanda Seyfried in this epic, fable-esque film about a religious leader building one of the largest utopian societies in American history. Honestly, I did not know much about this movie going in, but it was just that everyone was so excited. The line for this press screening lined up 2.5 hours in advance, and also there was huge Oscar buzz going in for the lead actress performance, so all of that combined, it's all I really needed to hear to be seated. And right out of the gate, what everyone wants to know, how good is this performance actually? It is absolutely phenomenal. This performance really evolves in a way that I just didn't really expect. I didn't know much about the story going in, and I also didn't know the scope and scale that it was going to take. And though it might not be getting to the scale of other American epics that we've gotten in the last couple of years, it does get to a certain point where it's so personal and it's so built into Amanda Seyfried's character and Lee that you can't help but just wonder what effects this has on the future of religion. I'm not going to get too deep into the character of Anne Lee because I don't know much about her as a historical figure, but in this film itself, I think the influence and impact of Anne Lee is shown. The best thing about this performance is not only how it evolves, but how the dynamic between characters is just so carried by Amanda Seyfried. There's a lot of body dancing and singing, and not only is her physical performance just absolutely brilliant, but in these minor emotional moments, the film does really exceed. The character of Anne Lee in this film didn't have as much depth as I wanted, but I think that the performance carries enough to where I can look past that a little bit. But I think this character succeeds more so in the different sequences that she's put through in the evolution of this film, and that's really where the character is built. There are just so many moments where I sat up because I was so interested to see where this story was going to go, where the specific sequence was going. I don't think the film comes together overall in the strongest way, but again, Amanda Seyfried is just delivering arguably one of the best performances of the year here. This larger than life idea of religion carried by her character is something that I just haven't really seen in a lot of films recently. And I'm also not a big period piece guy, though this was written by Brady Corbett, the director and writer of The Brutalist. That was one of the most interesting things going in, and so that's why I kind of gave this period piece a chance, even though again I'm not the biggest fan of the genre. And you do see the Brady Corbett isms from The Brutalist, and a lot of people have said this is just like The Brutalist but for women, and I don't think it gets as grand nor nearly as personal as that film, but it finds a really interesting middle ground, which is why I think a lot of the reactions are split down the middle. No one's saying it's phenomenal, but no one's saying it's the worst thing in the world. It just has a lot of great elements. It just doesn't come together properly. The fable-esque character slash story that's told with Anne Lee feels larger than life, but I don't necessarily think the technical elements really aid the middle ground that this film takes. Speaking of the visuals, this film was shot in 70mm, and I actually got to see the first, I would say 5 to 7 minutes of this movie in 70mm on film. It was absolutely gorgeous, but the projector cut out in those moments and we ended up watching it digitally after the fact. And you could definitely tell, I think there's a big difference, especially in the darker sequences. I think it feels a little bit more like an emulation, obviously, when you see it on digital, but I did still really enjoy the visual aspect of it. My biggest problem with period pieces in general is that I really don't like the pacing of them. A lot of times they take on trying to be this grand epic, spanning a lot of time, and it's just not interesting for the majority of the runtime. This film only really comes in at 2 hours and 15 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, and I think it's paced very, very well. I think doing the Anne Lee life is more interesting than just doing like the back half of it, and I think the first half of her life in that story is very, very essential. She died at the age of 48, which I think is really well executed in this film, and the way that this film starts with her family members and the way that all of that is just transitioned. I'm trying to be pretty broad here because I don't want to get into story specifics. The way all of that is really brought together, I think, makes the character of Anne Lee something worth talking about by the end of this film. At the end of the day, The Testament of Anne Lee really surprised me. I'm not a big fan of this genre, but Amanda Seyfried delivers one of the best performances of the year. Visually, this film is an absolute masterclass, and though I don't think it comes together perfectly by the end, the individual pieces of this film are absolutely brilliant. Overall, I'm going to give The Testament of Anne Lee a 7.5 out of 10. As always, let me know you guys thought of this film in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.